Hi, Ali. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm Ali Clare Connolly. If you haven't already figured that out by our little names down below, if you haven't watched our YouTube and listened to our podcast before, today we're going to be talking about what is an absolutely seminal, life-changing, foundation, core memory movie for me, which is Dirty Dancing. What's your kind of background with this film?
So I love this movie so much that I couldn't even watch the reboot because why mess with perfection? And
100%.
especially, or just, I mean, no discredit to the producers or the actors, but everything I heard about it, I went, nope, there's Johnny and Baby, and that's the way it played out, and that was great. So same, it had a huge impact on me watching it as a teenager. There is so much to love about it on a surface level, just as a form of entertainment. But going back and watching it analytically, I just think it is so well done as a story.
Yeah, it's fascinating too. Like, I was so obsessed, and I'll put some bits and pieces up, excuse me, on my social media about it, but I still have my original Dirty Dancing poster that I had on my wall when I was a kid. I remember coming out of the cinema, and I'd somehow convinced my mum to let me sit at the cinema, and I was probably a bit too young at the time. But I remember walking out and I couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't feel my toes. I was just felt like I had gone through a transformative experience. I had a Dirty Dancing shirt that I wore until it was absolutely threadbare. I had her hair cut. I don't know, no one would even notice her watch, but the watch that she wears, I got for my birthday the next year. I found one that was almost the same. It was just the most, yeah, it was transformative, this film. I just loved it. And of course, and the fact it was such a low budget film, and it was just like kind of one of the original sleeper hits that had such an incredibly low budget. It was filmed in such a short amount of time, and for it to come out and just be this popular is amazing. And as you say, when you go back and watch it again, watching it from this perspective, I often kind of find myself kind of gripping the notebook going, I hope I'm going to love it the same, looking at it analytically. But oh my gosh, it just completely held up. I'm so thrilled.
Up, even with changing cultural values. So it was made in 1987 or released in 1987. So obviously society has moved so much in that time. But watching it now, I just felt like so much of it's done itself proud. Its characterization on the whole of women and views of the world, I think, really do stand up well.
Yep. Absolutely. So I think, and we'll touch on sort of reasons why as we go through it. But we're going to be looking at it through the lens of how to watch this movie like a writer. So as we talk about all different parts of the film, we're going to be touching on ways that for the writers out there, you guys can maybe learn from it and use some of the same techniques in your own books. But we'll start with looking at the tropes. So what kind of tropes did you find along the way? I think like the opposites attract kind of one was the one that really stood out to me. What did you find along the way as well?
Yeah, I found it quite tropey. So certainly enemies to lovers, where that initially a lot of the conflict and tension came from the fact that Johnny is so disparaging to Baby. She's, because of that opposites attract, she's kind of everything that he doesn't like. And even that Penny is quite disparaging of her initially, because she's obviously from a very privileged background, and they don't know what we know from the very first scene, which is how socially active she is and how much she wants to help people who are less fortunate. Her eyes are wide open to the disparities in the world, but what they perceive her as is another one of these very spoiled rich kids who comes to Elements every year. So that creates this kind of, really, Johnny is so mean to her initially, in a, not crossing the line because it's still kind of hot, but he's just obviously a bit dismissive.
Yeah. He explains that later on. We're going to jump back and forth. I love that kind of, he explains why later. Like, I feel like I've met a million of you before until I got to know you and realized you're not like the others. So he's coming at it from a place of, sort of self-protection as well.
Yeah, so I think for me, those were definitely the main tropes that really make it sing. So it's sort of that enemies to lovers and the opposites attract. There's also that forced proximity element. So in the setup of the movie does a great job of establishing really early on what the goal is of each character and why there's sort of a really good goal / motivation should almost trap the character into a course of action. So the fact that he loves Penny. It's established that they used to be a couple. They've known each other since they were kids, so his loyalty to her is unquestionable. So you fully understand why he would move heaven and earth to help her. Baby wants to help everybody, so she's motivated. And the challenge when Johnny says that he can't teach her to do the dance at the Sheldrake, and you can just see it in her eyes, that moment of challenge accepted. But it forces them then, this shared goal forces them together, even when they still initially, he doesn't really like her or rate her. It means that they have to spend this time together, which gives them the perfect background to get to know one another, which is a great tool in a book to make your characters be together even when they otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah. So when you're looking at structure, so we talk quite deeply on story beats and structure in our How to Write Love course. And something I find really fascinating about this one is that the opening is quite long. So the bit that you're talking about there, kind of that moment where suddenly they have to work together. And so you had this huge kind of opening scene, which is this whole old world setup where you can see what Baby's life is like. You can see what Johnny's life is like. And there's quite a lot of getting to know you of the characters before the story kind of really gets going. But it's done in such a way that you're completely engaged. So oftentimes you can find audiences or readers getting a little bit antsy if there's too much setup at the beginning. But in this, you don't feel that at all. And then when you get to that point where you have when you're looking at story beats and you have that inciting incident, really is the fact that Penny can't do the show and she needs help. And then that whole conversation you just mentioned where they're like, why don't you do it? And him saying, you can't do it. And her saying, well, watch me. That is like 3 major story beats happening in that kind of bam, bam, bam. And so that then the plan, so the end of Act 1 is really the plan that's, okay, we're going to learn the dance so that we can perform at the Sheldrake. So you have all this beautiful setup at the beginning. And after that point is where you're heading to Act 2 and the funny names really kind of start. But it was really fascinating that to show that when you look at story beats, oftentimes they can seem quite prescriptive and the amount of time that should be spent on a setup before the story gets going. This one kind of like mucks with that a little bit, but in a way that's completely beautifully done. And I think so much of that comes down to getting to know the characters. And so we'd had a little bit of a chat before we were on here talking about that was kind of the characterization in this film is so beautifully done. Something I found really interesting is like what's in a name, like the naming of these characters. So I think the Johnny Castle is just there's something just so of its age, of its era. It's got that kind of bad boy kind of like, it's like, it's so,
though.
Yeah. There's something always cartoony about it. It's like, it's so, but it completely, and then you have the fact that like Baby Houseman and the fact that this movie is such a coming of age story, that her nickname is Baby. So at the beginning, you're kind of made to see that you're made to see her as such an innocent, kind of on that tipping point to coming into adulthood. So the names are just adorable. And I think makes you think about, like, as a writer, when you're choosing a name, how important that is and how that those names are not accidental, how the writers have really thought about it.
And the thing with this movie is both characters change each other so much in the story, and that I feel that him using the name Frances at the end, that's the signal to us that he sees her not as Baby, it's coming of age complete. So he has seen her go from this innocent into a woman who's taught him about the kind of man that he wants to be. And so they both have this kind of character turn or growth, which it's a really nice way to indicate that to the viewer or reader.
And completely deliberate, like those sort of choices that you make as a writer, to have that as just another layer of sort of showing how the stories evolved and how the characters evolved. That was super cute. And I think that the wonderful thing with the characterization here, when you're looking at sort of character archetypes, you've got he's just like the quintessential kind of rebel bad boy when he first comes in with the dark sunglasses and the shirt slung over his shoulder, and he's constantly in the tight black pants, and it's just, and the type of car that he has, like so many indicators that in a film you can do visually so quickly. But all of those things, when you're writing a book, like deciding what your characters are wearing, this is such a quintessential example. And then you've got Baby, who's in pale pastels. She's constantly in these kind of little sort of the sort of ditzy flowers and the sort of cardigan and pedal pushes, and everything's very sweet and innocent. And you've you've got so much of the time that they spend where he's in black and she's in white, and it just shows off the girl next door versus the bad boy kind of thing. In a blink of an eye, you get that straight away.
Yeah. And also as a writer, you know, there are another really easy way to indicate what kind of character you're dealing with is verbs. You know, how does he walk into a room? Does he stroll? Does he stride? Does he stomp? You know, because different characters will walk differently. Does he talk? Does he growl? Does he groan? Does he, you know, there are these little ways that you can shorthand to the reader what sort of character you're dealing with.
Yeah, and again, it's just, even though the visual medium, just they have little shortcuts, you can take so much from it. Like watching these things to kind of see the quirk of an eyebrow or see kind of pitch of a breath, and how you can put that on the page, because it's so effective. And this film in particular, I think one of the reasons why it's so appealing is because of her. And we feel everything she feels. Like the way that Jennifer Grey acts this part, the way you can see the kind of flush in the cheeks or the purse of the lips when she's uncomfortable, or little hitch of a breath when when she's drawn into dance with him. Like the visuals that you get from her as the person watching the film, we are in her shoes the whole time. And that is when you sort of learning about show don't tell. This again is such a brilliant example of showing how she's feeling in every single moment. And so that we as the reader or as the audience can absolutely feel that at the same time. I think such a massive part of the appeal of this film is how much she is us and we are her. It's just so beautifully done.
And I think you're right. Like, so one of the writing activities that I set for people wanting to get more comfortable with sex scenes is watch the scene in the cabin where she and Johnny end up making love and they dance together first. And what I say is watch it and write it. So take that scene and transcribe it, but with all of the gestures and the feelings, use the 5 senses, because it's a very sensory scene. You can imagine the coolness of the cabin, the breeze of the sheer curtains, the way his fingertips just glide over her skin. There is so much going on in that scene beyond just the physical that builds that tension. And you're right, it's because she's someone who acts with 110% of herself, and so does he, and their chemistry is so off the charts. But just as an exercise into what am I seeing on the screen, why does it work, and then trying to put that into words, choosing your verbs really carefully, and the pacing of it. You know, it's such a slow scene but with so much tension behind it. It's a great movie for that, and a great scene.
You're so right. And it's the things that you touched on like the setting is so important. You touched on kind of the senses and the tension, like so many things in that scene that are absolutely A+, top class, things that we cover in the course as well. But I think that I love the fact you talked on pacing. Like all of those things are done so beautifully in that scene. And you can feel, I think, as you say, that she does the 110% acting, but the tension in that scene is all him. He is just completely held together. Like, she instigates, she's the one who makes the first move, and he's holding back. You know that he wants to be there with her, but he just lets her kind of set the pace. And considering she's the innocent, it's just gorgeously done. It is so beautifully done.
And it's almost a power shift, right, in that scene, because we see him to a point in the movie as the one who is just unbreakable, big bad guy. And then you realize as they get to know each other and after that moment that he has these vulnerabilities, when he's talking about joining a union. And but in that scene, I love that she takes control, because there was that power imbalance or between them, obviously, in terms of life experience and exposures to things. And it just is so great that it's not about him seducing her. It's about her going, hey, we both feel this. And he does fight it, and him fighting it is so hot.
Yeah, it's so beautifully done. And that moment, I think you alluded to as well, that they kind of almost start with that kind of, they do it, one of the dance moves from what they've been learning, which in that moment you see that everything leading up to this point's been foreplay. And it's not really explicit on the screen, because the whole time that they're learning the dance in sort of that first part of the second act, they're they don't know each other. They're tripping over each other. They're kind of learning one another along the way. But for all that we're sitting there going, this is just adorable. Oh my gosh, we're on the edge of our seats waiting to see what's going to happen with the sort of the love story side of it. They're really kind of getting to know one another. But as soon as there's that little dance, that little move where he kind of puts her back and it's one of the moves that they've been learning together, you kind of just go, oh my gosh, like all of that was leading up to this, even if neither of them were kind of admitting it to themselves. It's just, it's splendiferous. It's so good.
Really.
And I think that, so talking about the fact that she, you know, looking at creating compelling characters, and she is handled so beautifully that we're in her shoes the whole time. Then you look at why is he so appealing? So did you have some thoughts on, like, apart from just like general delicious Patrick Swayze-ness, what do you think about him made him so appealing and compelling?
So I think that the rule of thumb for me, because I write sort of alpha bad boys with a heart of gold. So the rule for me is you can have them outwardly be a bit shitty, which he is to Baby in the beginning, as long as you're also signaling that they have a good side. So we see that in the fact he got his cousin a job, and we see that in the way he is revered by his dancing peers and by the way he is with Penny, you know, so super protective of her. So we know he's not a bad guy, but he has got an attitude, wrong side of the track sort of attitude or misconception about Baby, but that's not the same thing as being just a total alcohol.
100%. I think it's that, like, I'm a cornered animal. I need to kind of like lash out to protect, like, you know, the way that he treats her. I think you do, when you learn that he's sort of protecting himself because he's probably fallen for that before. Like, you know, there's women putting diamonds in my pocket, and you can imagine that he's probably had a relationship thinking this was something real in the past, and it just hasn't been, and so he's been hurt by that. But you're so right. I think having that, the fact that he's so, when you have any character, any secondary characters who are people that you like and people who clearly look up to the lead, it really gives the reader or the audience member an idea of, okay, if this person is loved by so many people, you once the other person, once the heroine sort of gets to know him, that she'll see those facets as well. It's such a great way to use secondary characters when you've got characters who might be a little bit challenging or might be a little bit scratchy. When you see that they have family or friends who adore them, it kind of gives you that cushion to kind of get to know them. And I think, as you said too, like in that second half, sort of after the love scene and that whole second half of the film, when he starts to open up and become more vulnerable as well, is just such a, I think that is just such a beautiful thing from when you see this kind of big, strong man start to really open up and be vulnerable. It's like, it's, again, so beautifully done. And I think something that sorry, you go.
We see it flip then to Baby's dad with the misconceptions about Johnny. You know, and so then when Johnny is treated badly by the father, we're feeling that pain for him, that he's being judged based on wrong information.
And again, it's like it's like that kind of hurt puppy thing that he's been kicked and kicked and kicked his whole life. And this is just happening again, sort of thing. You think, God, how many times can you get kicked before you don't get up again? And all of those things are really heroic. The fact that you might be knocked down, but you get back up, and you might be knocked down, but you're still kind. You might be knocked down, but you still look after those who you see as under your care. So there's so many sort of beautiful, valuable attributes on top of the fact that you've just got, you know, this amazing dancer who's this, you know, amazing, capable, handsome guy. It's all of those other layers that absolutely make him so much more sort of hero material than just kind of the surface stuff. So
that was the other thing I was going to say about the characterization is, I know you're going to have a really clever way of describing this, but when you have a character who's outside the norm in an area, like an expert kind of archetype, like Jack Reacher, or I've forgotten the name of the lead character in the Da Vinci Code, or, you know, someone who is a genius or a prodigy or something like that, there is something fascinating and intrinsically compelling about a character like that. And I think there's an element of that with Johnny, that you see him as, and so far outside the norm that you kind of invest in him on that level too.
Yeah. It's so appealing. It's so attractive to meet someone who is really good at what they do. And it, you know, is, as you say, an expert in their field. That is just an intrinsically attractive quality. So there's so many layers to it that I'd never even considered. you know, having just watched the film and loved it 1,000 times, and to be able to kind of look into it and see how beautifully these things have been layered in a deliberate way by the writers is just, you know, it's so wonderful. So I think too, I'm trying to think when you were talking before about something twigged, looking at the sort of different worlds that they come from, looking at conflict and tension and where those things are kind of built. And I think in the movie there's the external conflict is set up like perfectly from the very first moment when you see the different worlds that they're from, when you see that she's from this sort of cosseted, comfortable, wealthy situation, and she's got a strong family unit, and you see Johnny come in as kind of the clearly like he's got the chip on his shoulder, and he's, you know, he's working job to job, like that sort of external conflict of the fact that there's kind of insiders and outsiders. And I love the fact that at the beginning she's an insider, she's on the inside, and he's an outsider. But as soon as you do the flip when she goes into the sort of the staff quarters and when they're dancing, carried a watermelon, like seriously classic moment. But suddenly she's the outsider and he's the insider. And I love stories like that where you see there's things in her world that he's clearly his entire life has this kind of craving and yearning for that kind of acceptance. But there's things in his world that she's been missing in her life that she sees in him. For all that she seems to have everything, there's things in his, there's that real feeling of kind of intimacy and understanding and found family that he has that she doesn't necessarily have. I think there's that thing of when you look at how do they go forward from the point at the end of the film, and what is it about one another that they are so attracted to. And I think he says to her at one point, he says, "You're not afraid of anything." And I think that's the thing that he just sits back and looks at her with like stars and hearts going around his head, is that's the one thing that he really finds appealing. Whereas for her, I think she feels seen, because her father clearly has visions of her going off and doing the Peace Corps, and has obviously been teaching, you know, she's daddy's girl. She's been set up to be this certain kind of person. And she's like, maybe I'm that, but maybe I'm more. Maybe I've got other things. And whereas Johnny, absolutely, he sees to the heart of her. And it's like they both are fulfilling those kind of things that are missing in one another. It's just blows my mind. So you've got that external conflict, which is just the where they come from and where they are financially and where they, you know, so many things. But it's the internal issues that they have with her not being seen, and him being constantly having to kind of live on the edge. They're kind of those fears that they have to get over, that they absolutely are able to kind of full circle seeing one another. Brilliant. So so internal conflict and external conflict are fabulous.
Yeah, there's a lot that she has to push through to be with him. I mean, I feel that when she went to Kellerman's, and again, the opening, if this was a book, the opening paragraph of the book, her little monologue ends with, "That was the summer we went to Kellerman's." And it's such a brilliant line, because just in saying past tense, "That was the summer we went to Kellerman's," it's implied something happened at Kellerman's that changes everything. And it does for her, you know. And I think where you spoke about how long it takes them to set up to get to the inciting incident, I think we see her world cracking open from the minute she sees these other people. And even when she hears Max talking to the wait staff and saying things like, "Dance with the daughters, even the ugly ones," it's like she, I think, would only have ever seen the veneer of that kind of character. And suddenly
I feel cracked when I see that scene. Like I feel that you say that's almost like the first time she's kind of seen that kind of other side, the ugly side, the dirty side, that moment there. Every time I see the film, it hurts my heart, because I just feel that's the first step. That's almost like her first step into the real world somehow. Gosh, that's good.
It's so good and so well done, because we like Max, but we talk about this coming of age, and it is for her and Johnny, but it's such a coming of age movie for society. And they set that up in the beginning by saying this was before the Beatles and before the President Kennedy was shot. And you see that Max at the end talking to Tito, where he's saying, he's talking about this is what kids now, they want to go to Europe, 22 countries in 12 days or whatever. The world is changing. They're on the precipice of that. And that final dance at the end, for me, I choose to believe that Kellerman's changes after this year too, that it becomes somewhere that is modernizing, and that Johnny does come back and the dance crew come back, and, so there's a lot of change that happens.
For sure. I love that.
Yeah, and just quickly coming back to characterization, because it occurred to me as you were talking and we were saying about the watermelon scene, that's another way they made Baby so super endearing, because she was a bit of a dork, and we as readers, you love a character who's not finessed, whether it's a guy or a girl, someone who kind of is a bit uncomfortable in certain situations, a bit gawky. That's super endearing, and you root for them from the beginning.
Yeah. For sure, 100%. I love it. And something you said then triggered something, and now it's gone out of my head, whether it was the coming of age. I think I was going to talk about, again, sort of a characterization thing, but also a really important part of story structure is her relationship with her dad. And again, this could have been really surfaced, really kind of like kind of a B story that just kind of pops in and then to kind of help her story go. But the acting between the two of them, the relationship, you can feel that they've probably had a really beautiful relationship, that he loves her so much. She is daddy's girl, but there is that kind of like stifling of adulthood that he doesn't even know is happening, that by the end of it, when he sees what's been happening, it's just all beautiful. But one of the big moments it's gorgeous. And again, the more I watch it and go, gosh, the acting in this it's beautifully cast. He's an amazing actor, but for such a sort of small budget and quick shoot, the emotion and everything they were able to get across was amazing. But the relationship with the father is so important, because a story beat that you'll often find in a lot of story structure is sort of the death of the mentor. And you'll see this in, spoiler alert, every single Star Wars movie. But a lot of movies, if you have someone who is that person who has always been your protector, or that person you've always lent on, whether it's sort of a university lecturer or a family member, or just someone who's always been your leaning post, and for her that's been her dad, for her to come into her own, for her to become an adult, for her to kind of step out and sort of face her fears and be who she's meant to be. The death of a mentor for her, isn't it? And it isn't always an actual death. It's that breaking of the relationship with the dad, her being able to stand up to him and say, I'm not who you think I am. And it's handled in a way that it's so heartbreaking. That scene where he's like, all rugged up on the patio looking out over that sort of the rainy lake, and he's obviously just hurting so much. But for her to go there and sort of tell her truth, and he doesn't say a word. It's just so beautifully handled, but it's necessary. It's like there's no way that she would have been able to then step into her adulthood and kind of take that next step and truly be with Johnny if they hadn't have had that moment for her to kind of step up and say, I'm a grown up now. Like, I'm going to make choices that you might not agree with, but I love you and you love me and we're going to be okay. Like, spectacular.
Yeah.
So beautifully done.
Fallen from her eyes, in a sense, where she says, you wanted me to make the world a better place, but you meant by being like you. And so she's recognizing that she's her own person, walking her own path. But I love the moment. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. It makes me teary at the end of the movie, where he says, you were wonderful out there tonight. Like, he saw her and he validated her and who she is now. I think he could have done a better job in his apology to Johnny, but it was, because he was really mean to Johnny for the entire movie. But, oh, man, that moment where he sees her and she's fought to be seen as she actually is, which is just more than what he thought, different,
Yeah.
I thought that was really great to show the turning point of their relationship.
100%, and kind of leading sort of backwards from that when we're looking at story structure again. So that sort of breaking of the relationship with the father, which leads to Johnny having to leave, like, that's the whole kind of all is lost moment of the movie. And something I loved so much about it is so often, and I love writing all is lost moment, where the hero and the heroine hit a point where they realize they have to go all in, but to do that means they have to really face their fears, and it suddenly becomes too much. And so they do whatever happens to sort of break apart and go, we we can't do this. Neither of us can do this. I'm not brave enough. I'm going to go back to my little old world where everything was okay and safe. Whereas in this, it's like circumstance
It's
makes it
external conflict,
happen.
right? And
Yeah,
so
but it's still wonderful. Like usually you need that internal to be really meaningful, but the fact that circumstance has put this in their path and made it happen, and the fact they have beautiful grown up goodbye with humor and heartache, and but neither of them in that moment are ready to kind of stand up and go, I'm coming with you, or I'm going to leave, or like they still weren't ready. So it's still a beautiful black moment. It's still a beautiful all is lost moment where they separate. And then that time apart with obviously, which is off the page really, that we see that, which is often that kind of long, dark night of the soul leads to a light bulb moment where the hero and heroine go, okay, so I can keep going in the life that I'm on now, or I can just sort of step up and go, no, I want to be with this person. And all that happens off the page. You still get that build to the big ending, which something we talk about in the All About Structure module in How to Write Love is that final act, which is often they gather the troops and storm the castle. And like, this is just classic. He literally walks in and all of his dance kids are all behind him as he storms the castle, which is basically kind of establishment, you know, is kind of the old way, is this the Kellermans would have been running the same way for a long, long time, for many, many years. Everybody would have turned up to Kellermans and it would have been a comfortable place where everything was always the same. And so for him to sort of storm that castle is unbelievable. It was so beautifully done. And something I love about many things I love about that final scene, I think that entire final act is absolutely perfect, is that when the whole dance happening, which is with him and his dance peeps, but he constantly looks back at her. He's constantly checking her to make sure she's okay when they're separated. It's just the connection between them is so believable and so beautiful. And there's so little dialogue that happens in that final scene because it's so much about the music and so much about the dance and so much about the sort of non-verbal, the way they look at each other, the way that when they dance together, she's so much looser than she was the first time. The fact that when he sort of runs her out to the end of his arms, she just bursts out laughing. Like, it's just joy. And every single line of dialogue just ups the joy, because like the scene with the father, when the mother says, you know, sit down when he's about to get up, like it's funny. It's every single line is, and when the two older gentlemen have the talk about things changing, it's still like there's still some beauty and joy in all of that. The entire last scene is it's like happy ending on top of happy ending on top of happy ending as everybody's relationships all kind of bloom. It's spectacular. I love it.
And also that their relationship, Johnny and Baby were leaving on their own, regardless of what her dad thought and him not approving of the relationship. So that thing, I want to see you running off to daddy and telling him that I'm your guy, showed that, you know, in that sense, she didn't care anymore about the approval of her parents. This was her guy and she was going to leave with him. And so the dad coming up to them at the end was just the icing on the cake. You know, we didn't need it to know that they were a great couple, but it was redemptive for him and important for his relationship to Baby. But you could just see their strength as a couple by that scene.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And so it's that thing of like the way that they just had their eyes on each other the whole time. It was like they're just in this together no matter what. And so all those extra little bits that were added at the end, like the fact that, you know, that the dad sort of takes the money away from what's his name? Horror. Yeah. And you know, when the mum and dad are dancing together and you know, when the sort of this, and when Lisa, when the sister's dancing, when all of those little things weren't necessary for you to believe that these two are just have eyes on each other, but that just added layers and layers and layers of just goosebumps and joy. And I think one of the beautiful things about movies like this, and you go sort of Strictly Ballroom, or you look at The Full Monty, or any movie that has that kind of final dance number, and if they can do it in such a way that you are left just feeling joyful. And I think that is the brilliance of a romance novel, is that when you have that final moment of the declaration and you realize that they've hit a point where they're like, no, we want to be together more than anything else. We know how good for each other we are. We kind to each other, we respect one another, we can communicate, we can compromise, we have this, And when in a romance novel you can kind of close that final page and feel like that kind of feeling, you get that from movies like this. You get that from movies that have that big dance number.
Yeah, so and just touching on that quickly, this was an epilogue. Like we saw, so with Max saying to Tito, have you got sheet music on this stuff? We got quickly that he was going to try to change this. Seeing the two older women dancing together in the groove, you got the fact that the established long-term Kellerman's guests were going to be on board with this. We saw Robbie get his comeuppance. We saw Penny hugging Jake. So we saw her, you know, dressed nicely, looking great, him accepting her. And then we saw Johnny and Baby dancing together and him singing a song to her like an absolute love song ode. It was really an epilogue. It gave you the epilogue feels. You knew that, yes, the world had changed, but everything was better than okay.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. Just, yeah, I'm so beautifully amazed by like everything that we've spoken about and how gloriously done it was in this movie. And all of those things are things that as an audience member, as a reader, you don't think about, you just reap the benefits. You just feel feels and you believe what's happening and you trust that things are going to be okay because of all of these measures that have been put in place by the clever writing. It's so fantastic.
Which is why doing this, being really conscious and analytical, I think when you have a strong reaction, either good or bad, to something, you should spend the time as a writer to go back and just think about why. You know, was it that I particularly liked the characters? Was it that the happy ending was really great? Was it that I wasn't happy with the ending? You know, because there's so much in this movie, like you said, to take away that you can apply then to your writing, particularly if you're a romance writer, about character dynamics and tension and happy endings that will make you a better writer.
100%. This one I think is I feel of all the ones that we've watched so far, I feel like this just kind of covers everything. It gives you such a beautiful look at things, especially from a bookish point of view. When you're looking at setting, when you're looking at the setting of Kellerman's compared to the setting of Johnny's bedroom, compared to the setting of where they do the dance lessons in that, you know, sort of small room with the rain and the heat and the humidity, and the setting gives you so much. When you're looking at the costuming, so looking at how you dress your characters, when you're looking at how you name your characters, when you're looking at that show don't tell of how your characters are feeling, and looking at the tension that is created all the way through, as well as the story structure. This has everything. You can learn so much from it of how to do all these things in a way that make readers clearly compelled to love it and watch it again and again, and still, like, many years later, be so in love with this film without even knowing why. All of those little ingredients all deliberately put there, and it's such a great lesson, as well as being just beautifully entertaining.
So it's not a movie you can watch and scroll your phone. Like, I was trying to do a Woolies order when I rewatched it the other night, and I was just like, forget about it. It is eyes on the screen the whole time. It's so compelling. The dialogue's so great. Everything about it is fantastic. It is a masterclass.
It is fully a masterclass. Totally agree. So I even feel like I need to watch it again after hearing all of your take on it as well. Like, and I easily just pick it back on again and just sit like close to the TV, just sighing the whole way through. Oh, amazing. Now, is there anything else you particularly want to cover that we haven't covered you think would be of use?
I think we've got it. I think we could also talk for another 5 hours about it. But let's do a little capsule of the high points. We can revisit if needed.
Oh, I love it. So, yeah, I think I'm good.
So great. Well, we hope you've enjoyed our Dirty Dancing chat. If you've got any comments or questions or movies that you really want us to watch and analyze, please leave a note for us. We have got a new course starting in February. We will be running How to Write Love courses 4 times a year. They are a phenomenal way to upskill as a writer. We talk about all the things we've covered today and so much more, including pathways to publication. So definitely worth taking a look at our website, howtowriteacademy.com, for more information.
Yay. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you suggested Dirty Dancing and that I was allowed to sit in, and we didn't let Amy and Jen. So we took control. So thank you guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.